Pierre, Poilievre derangement syndrome has begun. It's Fake News Friday. I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is a very special live edition of the Candice Malcolm Show. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to a live edition of Fake News Friday. I'm joined by my producer and True North journalist, Harrison Faulkner. Harrison, how are you doing this Friday?
Pretty good, Candice. I'm just getting over a bit of a sickness, so I hope my voice isn't too bad. But after watching all the stories come through this week, the anticipation of the show has been building, so I'm looking forward to getting into it.
Well, it was really quite the news week, and there's so much going on in the country. This is just a total aside. I have a Google Home, and usually in the morning I'll say, "Hey Google, what's the news?" And it'll first play me CBC and then CTV. And it's just like unbelievable how out of touch the CBC is in the stories that they select, the things that they choose to show me. Like the top story was some monkey virus is apparently causing like all this fear and consternation. It's like they're drumming up the fear machine over another mysterious illness that's coming out, and then it goes right to more Ukraine, more Russia stuff. Like nothing involving inflation, the rising cost of living, nothing really covering the political turmoil in Alberta that's going on, nothing on the big leadership race in the country. It was like I couldn't believe how out of touch the stories that they chose were with the things that we talk about here at True North. It's really like two totally different countries. We're showing a totally different side of Canada that the CBC doesn't even really recognize or acknowledge. It's super interesting, and that's why it's so much fun doing what we do, Harrison. And I think Fake News Friday is everybody's favorite show on the Candice Malcolm Show because it gives us an opportunity to draw that distinction, talk about what the legacy media is talking about, and just how sort of out of step it is with the way that we see it, with our coverage, with our audience. And I think really the defining news story this week was just that this anti-Pierre Poilievre sentiment in the media is just out of control. Like they're so deranged already. Now, this term derangement syndrome, I know it was used against George W. Bush down in the US. It was used as the Harper derangement syndrome. And it really just describes a media that is just so off-put and so filled with hatred about a conservative politician that they can't be objective in any way, shape, or form. Like the way that they view it, the lens that they have is just so void of reality. And we'll show you a bunch of examples of that here on the show today. But really, their hatred of conservatives just clouds their vision so much that they can't provide a neutral analysis. Any kind of fact-based analysis, you can't get that from the mainstream media because they just hate conservatives so much, and it comes out. So I'm going to start by showing this Globe and Mail article written by Gary Mason. And look, this is an opinion piece, and he's entitled to his opinion. He's a national affairs columnist over there. He's been doing it for a long time, and he can have opinions about politicians as part of his job, as part of why the Globe and Mail pays him. But the problem is, even a opinion columnist, and I was an opinion columnist over at the Toronto Sun for almost a decade. Your pieces still have to be based in fact. You have to be able to articulate your logic and explain why you got to the position you did. You can't just lie. Just because you're an opinion columnist, you can't just put out falsehoods. You still have to back it up. It's still journalism. You still have to back it up with facts and the truth. And I think this piece is pretty egregious, and it's just blatant anti-Pierre Poilievre hatred. So I'll read a little bit from the article here, Harrison, and I'll get your reaction. So he starts off by saying the Ottawa MP didn't organize the protest in Peterborough, but his campaign to become Tory leader has legitimized the anger that was on display there. Now, of course, we're talking about this incident that happened last week where Jagmeet Singh, the NDP leader, showed up in Peterborough, and there was like 3 or 4 pretty aggressive hecklers. And look, no one condones the treatment of Jagmeet Singh. I think that people with that kind of anger towards a politician, it's unjustified, it's unbecoming for us as Canadians. However, it was a very, very small group of people. Politicians probably face this stuff all the time. It sort of reflects the anger and the rhetoric that we see online, and it's just sort of spilling over into in person. But the media made such hay about this and tried to make it into this this idea that it was really about Jagmeet Singh's race and his ethnicity, and it wasn't really about his policies and his politics. I think that people are angry at Jagmeet Singh because he enables Justin Trudeau, and they don't feel accountability. They feel like their country's being taken away. They feel like, we elected Justin Trudeau as a minority leader, and now all of a sudden he's been given the supermajority because of the NDP. So there's, I think, legitimate anger, and obviously, no, you shouldn't let that spill out in terms of like harassing someone and yelling at them and screaming at them. But there's underlying issues there. And so the media just gloss over all of that, of course, and just turn it into like, oh, Jagmeet Singh, he's the victim, and how dare these Canadians do that, kind of ignoring all of the anger that was legitimate. Anyway, that's an aside. I'll continue reading from Gary Mason's piece. He says, in many ways, it's also his anger, talking about Pierre Poilievre, and it reflects the contempt he holds for the prime minister. He has given these people reason to believe Mr. Trudeau is one of the most despicable people in the country. So somehow, the anger towards Jagmeet Singh and the belief that Justin Trudeau is the most despicable person in the country, it's all Pierre's fault. Like, forget about Justin Trudeau's record over the last 7 years in office. Forget about all the things he's done. Forget about his horrendous treatment of the unvaccinated and his horrendous treatment of the truckers and his refusal to even acknowledge them as human beings. Nothing is Justin Trudeau's fault. It's all Pierre Poilievre's fault somehow. I mean, this is just so outrageous. I'll continue. Just to quote Gary Mason here, he says about Pierre, he's done this by running the most dishonest and contemptible political campaigns ever seen in Canada. Every day, he seems to find a new low, accusing the Prime Minister of sinister things that the so-called Freedom Convoy, in scare quotes, folks lap up like mindless fools. So what is his evidence here, Harrison, for calling Pierre Poilievre the most dishonest and contemptible political campaigns ever seen in Canada? Really, like that is a shocking accusation. And I looked through the piece trying to find facts to justify this and to back this up. It seems to me not fact based whatsoever, just purely rage, purely anti-conservative bigotry on full display. I hate Pierre Poilievre. I hate him so much. I don't even have to explain why I hate him, but he is so dishonest and so contemptible. And the Globe and Mail just turns around and publishes it up. No big deal. That's
Yeah.
the of conservatives over there.
No, and here's the thing. Gary Mason's language here, one of the most dishonest, contemptible political campaigns ever seen in Canada. Well, Gary, I can think of a campaign that was run last year by our prime minister that might fit that bill more accurately than Pierre Poilievre's campaign. One that I believe is barely even a quarter complete, Candice. We're a few months into this, and already it's the most contemptible campaign, apparently. And this is the thing. This is the thing that really gets under my skin about this, is that he says one of the reasons why Pierre Poilievre's campaign is apparently one of the most contemptible he's ever seen, is because he accused Trudeau of basically running a surveillance state and spying on Canadians. Well, it turns out, Candice, that actually the feds did do that during the pandemic. They did track cell phone data. They did figure out when you were going to the pharmacy and where you were going, and they admitted to it. So again, it's by calling out the prime minister for the problems that the country is currently facing, and by being one of the only candidates, in my opinion, that articulates the issues Canadians are facing. Apparently that, according to the Globe and Mail, is contemptible and dishonest. But when you run a political campaign intentionally trying to wedge the unvaccinated out of the society, and pin the blame of COVID on the unvaccinated, as Justin Trudeau did during the federal election, no, of course, that doesn't get any mention. It's only when candidates who actually articulate the feelings of Canadians and do so in a way that grabs attention, it's only then that it becomes contemptible. It's a classic example of an opinion piece that lacks any grounding in reality, Candice.
Well, yeah, I mean, just the matter of factly saying this is the most dishonest, contemptible political campaigns I've ever seen in Canada. I mean, you raise a great point. What about what Justin Trudeau did to the unvaccinated?
Yeah.
He went on TV in Quebec and said these people we shouldn't tolerate them. They're racist and xenophobic, and they don't believe in science. We have to ask ourselves,
Horrendous.
should we tolerate them? Like, what do you mean, should we tolerate them? Like, you live in a society with other people that you don't agree with. Yes, you tolerate them. What's the alternative? Like expelling them or worse? I mean, and you could even go back, Harrison, to the 2019 election, where the Liberals just essentially said that Andrew Scheer was a white nationalist without any basis in reality, without any facts. That was their line of attack against him, that he was a white nationalist because he once went to a park one someday and stood by someone who said something else, and then that person 3 years later did this, like that. Like, trying to keep up with the logic of the rationale of the arguments from the Liberal Party. You don't have the Globe and Mail shining a light on that. They just kind of take it as fact and say, oh yeah, this guy winks and nods at white nationalists. And we'll see in this show that now they're pulling out that exact same line of attack again against Pierre Poilievre. So it's not just Gary Mason over in the Globe and Mail that's doing this. We saw this interesting piece over at CTV News. So we all saw that Pierre Poilievre was on with Jordan Peterson, and they did an interesting hour and a half discussion on Peterson's podcast, which has 5 million subscribers. Well, CTV parsed through that podcast and tried to find something controversial. This is the best they could come up with. So the headline says Poilievre faces backlash for comments on Jordan Peterson podcast. I just love the way that they describe it. So here's reading from the piece. He says, this is Glenn McGregor writing. He says, some are calling attention to a comment Conservative leadership candidate Pierre Poilievre made while appearing as a guest on the controversial psychologist Jordan Peterson's podcast. I love that phrase of speech there, the controversial psychologist. How about like the incredibly influential and popular, one of the best-selling Canadian authors in history, outside of the entertainment sphere, probably the most famous Canadian and the most influential living public intellectual. But instead, no, they call him controversial because they don't like what he has to say. Regardless, so the controversy is that Pierre supposedly was using a dog whistle. I think we have a clip of this, so we will play the allegedly controversial clip and that he's supposedly receiving backlash for. Here's that clip.
Makes you credible on the hope front, do you think, in terms of what you're offering and who you are?
Because I speak clear, plain language that makes sense to people. So, I'm a believer in using simple anglo-saxon words that strike right at the meaning that I'm trying to.
Okay, Harrison. So that's supposedly the source of all kinds of controversy. Pierre Poilievre saying that he speaks in plain language and that he's a believer in using simple Anglo-Saxon words. Anglo-Saxon is a synonymous with Old English. Like it just means English, basically, in the literature sense. But him saying those words apparently just caused a huge backlash. So what? Why don't you walk us through the rest of the story, Harrison?
Well, I mean, of course, when you've got the entire legacy media paying attention to any potential thing that they can misconstrue as, whether you want to call it a dog whistle or you want to call it whatever else you want to call it, racism or whatever, they're going to find anything they can and try and make it out to be that way. So, of course, when Poilievre said this, they immediately jumped on the fact that, oh, this is a word that is used also along with the far right. So in this CTV article, there's a part here where they talk about the Republicans that have used it and how it's nativist dog whistling, and then of course any hit piece in relation to the Freedom Convoy wouldn't be complete without a connection to Pat King, Candice, who I know you've talked about on the show before. But of course, they tie that into Pierre's comments by somehow saying that using the words Anglo-Saxon while describing clearly the fact that he is talking about using plain English and speaking directly to the people instead of using academic language or whatever kind of language, the way that other politicians speak. they jump on that and they try and make it seem as though by Poilievre saying he uses anglo-saxon plain language, which I think he, as we talked about before the show, Candice, was perhaps a way for him to try and appeal to Jordan Peterson, and speak in an academic sense. Of course, it immediately created this storm because everyone's looking for anything they can jump on. So just a classic CTV hit piece. This is also from Glenn McGregor, who played quite a role during the Freedom Convoy, trying to demonize and slander the people attending that protest. If some of our viewers remember.
Well, yeah, they went out and they interviewed a founder of a group called Canadians United Against Hate, who basically comes out and says that for far right people, Anglo-Saxon is a dog whistle, and it really just means a way to set apart white Canadians from racialized society. Like, I mean, it's got all the woke nonsense built right into this piece. But I have three points from this. The first one is I watched the podcast and I've interviewed Pierre myself, and I think that Pierre throughout the course of the podcast, what you just said, he was trying to sort of impress Dr. Peterson and show his own intellectual depth. He went much deeper in terms of like quoting poets and talking about philosophy than he would normally ever do. I mean, and that's the point, right? It's an hour and a half open dialogue. And so I think that there were several times throughout the podcast where Pierre did this, where he would sort of try to flex his intellectual capacity and try to be on the same level as Dr. Peterson. Dr. Peterson clearly has a very deep intellect. And so at that point, when he said, I'm a believer in simple Anglo-Saxon words, to me, that was him trying to show how smart he was by showing his depth of knowledge about the English language. I don't think that it was a nod to racism, right? I just can't imagine that was what was going through Pierre's mind when he said that. The second problem is when journalists try to interpret what was going into someone's mind and saying that it was a racist intent, like deciding that in Pierre's mind, when he said that word, that he was trying to signal something racist. And this is a whole problem with the idea of a dog whistle, right? It's like we used to hold people accountable for things that they said. If someone said something racist, you could hold them accountable for the racist thing that they said. The reality is that there isn't a lot of racism in political discourse in Canada. There's actually probably none. And so journalists have to go ahead and invent a racist discourse, and they do that through the dog whistle. So the dog whistle is supposedly blaming someone or holding someone accountable for something that they did not say, but reading in meaning of what they could have meant by that. And this is just such a disingenuous line of attack. Like anytime I hear the left saying dog whistle, dog whistle, dog whistle, it's like you're basically saying that you don't have anything. You don't have anything. That the person that you're trying to attack didn't say anything wrong. But if you put on your detective hat and you try to read their mind, you can draw layers into what they said, and what they really meant was this. And it's like,
Right.
in politics, you say what you really mean. That's what Pierre is talking about. We say what we mean. We don't say, we don't try to use flowery language to try to confuse the issue. We speak in simple language, plain language. And again, this is the media making things up, inventing stories. Like every time you hear the term dog whistle, you basically just stop reading the article or turn off the television or turn off the radio, because basically what the critics are saying is that you didn't say anything bad, but I'm going to interpret it to mean something bad. And it's just total nonsense in terms of persuasiveness. I think this is one of those idiotic stories, Harrison, that is just going to fade away. And then I said 3 points. The third point is that this is a kind of common sentiment among conservatives, is that in political language, there are a lot of people who try to complicate the issue. But if you want to be effective at communicating, you try to simplify it and you try to make it resonate to as many people as humanly possible. And this is something that conservatives teach each other and they learn. Like for me personally, I had more of an academic background. I used to work in think tanks, and then I started writing for the newspaper. And I had to learn to write in a totally different way. Like it's not academic writing anymore. It's writing that is clear, concise, use short words. And you realize that writing for an audience like the Toronto Sun, it's an amazing opportunity because you can reach so many people. And when you write in academic coded language, you can really only communicate to other academics, and other people don't understand it or they don't care, which is why nobody reads white papers and nobody reads academic papers. Whereas, when you talk about like popular sites where a lot of, people read it, it's like you want to make it as simple as possible. And so the point that Pierre was making is a really common sentiment in terms of writers, conservative writers specifically, and conservative politicians. And Garnet Janice, who's an MP out in Edmonton, he makes this point. He says on Twitter, critics of Pierre Poilievre are really reaching here. English derives predominantly of a combination of Anglo-Saxon, in other words, Old English, and Latin words. Anglo-Saxon words tend to be shorter and sharper than Latin words. Many writers and speakers know that when considering word choice. And it's absolutely true. We have this rule at True North with writing: never use a long word when a short word will do. And that's the idea. It's like, don't try to complicate things, right? Instead of saying we're going to terminate your contract, you say you're fired, right? It's like, don't complicate it. Don't use long words when you can use short words. Garnett goes on to say it's hard to believe that people who write for a living wouldn't know this, and yet Glenn McGregor, Alexandra May, who wrote this article for CTV, makes no mention of what Pierre was clearly talking about when he used the term Anglo-Saxon words, right? Like, they didn't go to the basic, obvious thing that he was talking about. Instead, they tried to complicate it and do this whole dog whistle thing by interpreting in something that he didn't say and he didn't actually mean. This is fake news. This is like absolutely, completely nonsense. Every single part of it is just absurd.
Yeah, and one thing as well that I think this is perhaps playing into, for Pierre Poilievre to go on the Jordan Peterson podcast, to spend an hour and a half chatting with him with an open, long form conversation. I think a lot of conservatives appreciated that conversation and enjoyed listening to that because it's refreshing. Now, I also think that is a threat to the legacy media. People sidestepping the legacy media and going straight to appealing straight to conservatives in these long form conversations. I think that part of this is to try and discourage other candidates and other conservatives from going on to Jordan Peterson's podcast, from going on to long form podcasts and having a wide ranging conversation, because they want to try and put the fear into these conservatives that if you say anything in this hour and a half that could be construed as something that we're going to determine for you as a dog whistle, then it's going to be very difficult for you to try and get out of it. I mean, I think more conservatives should be moving toward these long form conversations and sidestepping the legacy media and moving past their kind of soundbite clickbait news. And so I think there's also something to be said about that.
You're right. Yeah, I think that part of this is sort of, a warning from journalists. Like, this is what we're going to cover. This is what we're going to obsess over. We're going to make this all about how the conservatives are actually secret white nationalists. And if you go over to the independent media, and I think Jordan Peterson is firmly in that category, that we're gonna do our best to tear you down. I want to transition from here, Harrison, to say that it isn't just CTV and journalists like Glenn McGregor who are doing this nonsense. Unfortunately, it also comes from within the Conservative Party. So this week we also saw Patrick Brown unleash a campaign against Poilievre, basically using the same line of attack but coming from a different angle, saying that Poilievre supports a conspiracy theorist called Pat King and the supposed white replacement theory. So here's a tweet from Patrick Brown saying that just that. Let me read it. He says, "Here is Pat King, a leader of the convoy Pierre Poilievre supported, spreading the dangerous white supremacist white replacement conspiracy theory, which was reported to have been in the Buffalo Shooters Manifesto. I condemn this hate and call on Pierre to do the same." And then you pointed this out to me, Harrison. Maybe you can walk us through what this tweet, if we can just go back to that tweet for a second, what that was.
Yeah. So what you're seeing here is a video posted in 2019 by an account called Vests Canada. Now, those three arrows pointing down, that's sort of the symbol of the anti-fascist radical left. And I just went on to that account's Twitter page, and they openly put in their bio, anti-fascists exposing the Yellow Vest Canada movement. So what you have here, Candice, which I think to use the word contemptible, I think this fits the definition. What you have here is a conservative leadership candidate sharing sharing an account that is basically run by radical leftists trying to demonize conservatives, trying to demonize the right, and using it to basically attack Pierre Poilievre and reaching, I will say as well, because what you also have with this line of attack from Patrick Brown, Candice, which I don't understand, he is using the same tactics as Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau told Canadians that if you were if you were supporting the truckers, then you were also basically in favor of the one person waving the swastika flag or the one person waving the Confederate flag, and we all rightfully said that was terribly divisive. But Patrick Brown is now saying that because Pierre Poilievre supported the trucker convoy, he is now basically being lumped in with Pat King, someone who even the convoy organizers distanced from because they find his views to be horrible. So what we're seeing here is fundamentally not conservative at all, Candice. They're using a radical far left Twitter page to launch attacks on conservatives. And I think conservatives and Canadians should know about this sort of thing and frankly be generally upset about it because it's horribly divisive.
Well, and that's the reason we included it in Fake News Friday, because it's like when conservatives are the ones that go out and mimic this leftist narrative against like the left uses this as a hammer to destroy
Yeah.
conservatives by saying you guys are one step away from white nationalists. And it's incredibly damaging to conservatives. Conservatives need to fight back against this total nonsense. When you have someone like Patrick Brown kind of giving credence to it and giving it legitimacy and saying, yes, it's true, conservatives are aligned with the most despicable human beings on the planet, guess what? That's going to come back to haunt the party in the future. And of course, it's worth noting, if you just go back to that tweet one more time of Pat King, I mean, okay, first of all, Pat King, look at the guy. Like he's a despicable slob. He is a reprehensible human being. You can see a picture of him here. Patrick Brown says that he's a leader of the convoy that Pierre Poilievre supported. What? Like from our reporting and from what I saw, no one wanted anything to do with this lunatic at the Freedom Convoy. He was one of those like clingers on who would show up and everyone would be like, "Hey, buddy, we don't like you. You can leave now. Nobody wants you here." And he had some role as some regional organizer in the Alberta part of the convoy. Probably because people didn't realize how toxic he was and some of the crazy things that he would say online. And anyone that's peddling this nonsensical white replacement conspiracy theory clearly has no place within the Conservative Party. I mean, that's not something that conservatives talk about or think about or care about. Almost every conservative I know outright hates this theory and condemns it, including Pierre Poilievre. So this idea that Patrick Brown is pushing is so disingenuous, so dishonest, and again, just echoing the lies of the mainstream media, which give those lies more credibility. And then that's the problem. That's why we included it in Fake News Friday. Of course, it wasn't just Patrick Brown. There were other conservative candidates, including Jean Charest, who's also a leadership contender, who jumped into the fray to try to discredit Poilievre over his support, as well. So this idiot guy, Patrick King, made a video where he discussed anglo-saxon replacement. Again, he's not a conservative candidate. He's not running for office. He has nothing to do with the party. So why these conservatives are trying to lump him in and then somehow tie it to a crime that happened, a despicable mass shooting that happened in Buffalo, is just beyond me. Like anyone trying to draw this connection should be laughed out of a room, but instead it's being embraced by the people leading the party. This is one of the most divisive, just terrible tactics imaginable, Harrison, because obviously this is going to come back to haunt the party. Like if you don't think that in the next general election, whoever's leading the party, be it Jean Charest, Patrick Brown, or Pierre Poilievre, that the media is not going to take this exact line of attack that they've come up with here and use it against the Conservative Party and say, oh, you guys are all just Buffalo shooters. Oh, you guys are all just white replacement nationalists. They will. And they will do it because of what's gone on this week with these very misguided, in my opinion, conservatives who, again, are just using this as a cheap opportunity to dunk on the frontrunner, Pierre Poilievre. It's so damaging for the party. I remember 2 weeks ago, after the debate that I moderated in Ottawa, everyone was talking about how, this is so bad for conservatives because the way that they were duking it out and how confrontational they are, that feeds right into the Liberal Party's playbook. They can use these clips for attack ads. It's like, where are all those voices this week to say to people like Patrick Brown and Jean Charest, like, hey guys, how about we draw the line at accusing one another of being racist murderers? How about that? How about calling each other racist murderers is just a step too far?
Yeah, and this attack line spurred all of these fake news stories in the legacy media because, as we said at the beginning of the show, Candice, these journalists are looking for anything they can to jump on the front runner and to try and use it as a club to bash conservatives with. If Patrick Brown doesn't know that his attacks against Poilievre are being used to attack Conservative Party members and will be used to attack Conservative Party members, then I think that's something he has to take up with his own campaign. But this wasn't the end of the lines of attack that we saw from Patrick Brown's campaign. Michelle Rempel-Garner, who I believe is Patrick Brown's national campaign chair, I might be wrong about that, but she plays a role in Patrick Brown's campaign. And Candice, I know we talked about this, but she tweeted an email sent to Patrick Brown's campaign, which I wonder if we have the email on in the clip. We do. So here you see this. Michelle Rempel-Garner screenshotted an email sent to the campaign, and the email reads, "You have sent this to the wrong person." I'm not even going to read it, but basically, it's clearly ridiculous. Anyone who reads this would obviously know this is someone trying to troll the Conservatives and troll Pierre Poilievre. And Michelle Rempel-Garner and Patrick Brown took the bait. So she posted this out there, and in her tweet she writes, "The Patrick Brown campaign issued an email denouncing the racist white replacement conspiracy theory. Below is a screenshot of a response the campaign received. The campaign confirmed this email was sent from an active Conservative Party member." And there's another tweet too. She writes 3 tweets. So I think the second tweet from Michelle Rempel-Garner, there it is. She writes, "The campaign has forwarded this email to the party's executive director and have asked that this membership be revoked. We expect all campaigns will support this call." And there might be a third there as well. "No person who holds these vile beliefs should have a home in the Conservative Party of Canada." Now, Candice, I can't for the life of me think that this is the only time Patrick Brown's campaign has received a nasty email. And I'm sure that what they do most of the time is just discard them and not try and use it as a object to beat conservatives over the head with, especially if you're trying to lead the Conservative Party. But instead, what they do is they put this out there unsubstantiated without any real evidence of its legitimacy, and then basically put it out there for legacy media journalists to go and attack conservatives with.
It's like, yeah, guess what? Everyone gets like a bunch of spam and crazy
Yeah.
junk. Like, this is why I don't bother reading my comments on most social media sites. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of people who will write crazy stuff down behind their keyboards. Literally, someone sending Patrick Brown an email saying, "I believe in Nazism and I support Pierre Poilievre." Like, I mean, give me a break. And then the idea that they're going to take this and put it out on Twitter, which is going to lead to a bunch of stories saying, "Here you go, aha, I knew it. Nazis support the Conservatives. Nazis support Pierre Poilievre." Maybe like the 4 Nazis in Canada do. I don't know. I doubt it, because conservatives are also a very like ethnically diverse, open-minded group of people, and this idea that it has anything to do with Nazism is the most absurd thing you can imagine, given that the primary thing that Pierre Poilievre talks about is freedom and a free society, democracy, and the rule of law, which is the exact opposite of fascism and Nazism. That's why the two sides went to war in the Second World War. The war was all about the fight between freedom versus fascism, and Canada was on the freedom side. So anyway, I mean, it's so stupid that it's not even worth really going through and debunking. But I will just say, Harrison, this is a scorched earth approach to leadership. I mean, I can't imagine Michelle Rempel or Patrick Brown being welcome anywhere near the party. If they truly believe that Pierre Poilievre is out there winking and nodding at neo-Nazis, presumably they would, well, at least Michelle Rempel would resign as MP the moment Pierre wins, because why would she want to be part of a party that does that, led by a person that she believes does that? I don't think that she genuinely believes that. But really, I think that this line of attack and this strategy and this pushing of, again, the worst accusations from the depths of the far left, legitimizing the derangement in the media, with this line of attack, does nothing but damage to all conservatives. And these people really need to be called out, because this is absurd. So we already have the CBC story here: Conservative Party investigating the racist email sent to the Brown campaign. Well, good. I hope they find whoever sent it. Obviously, if it came from a party member, they can just track down who it was. And my guess is the person will probably say that it was a joke, or if that person truly does hold those beliefs, then absolutely they should be kicked out of the party, because that's crazy. But really, this whole thing is just a stretch in my mind.
No, and Patrick Brown's campaign is veering, I would say, into the territory of, as you say, scorched earth campaigning. It's sort of like kamikaze campaigning, because at what point can you possibly try and unify the party when you go on this line of attack, basically trying to accuse the supporters of the front runner of the race of being Nazis and white supremacists? There's no way you can recover from this, and it's kind of what you would want to do if you were intentionally trying to tank someone and bring everyone down with you. It's shocking politics, really. And then, Candice, this is the part that really was a bit of a surprise, because the day after, Patrick Brown sent an email to all Conservative Party members, basically linking Pierre Poilievre's support of the truckers to Pat King, and then disgustingly tying it to the Buffalo shooter, trying to play some sort of connection as though there's anything to be had there. The day after he sends that scathing email to Conservative Party members, he then goes on Twitter and writes, I want to make sure I have it right here. Yeah, Patrick Brown tweets, "When this race concludes, I want all Conservatives and all Canadians to unite behind a hopeful, united party that is focused on delivering a bright future for our country." I'm not sure how a U-turn like that can happen so quickly, Candice. Maybe they did some focus groups and polling and decided that actually their approach of basically destroying party unity was not working for them. But I mean, what can you say about this? This is a shocking U-turn, really.
Well, it's the icing on the cake of hypocrisy. Like, I can throw every grenade I have at you. Like I said, I can accuse you of the worst possible things imaginable, including being a Nazi and being on board with a racist massacre in another country. But hey, guys, let's just all get along. Can't we all be friends? Like, give me a break. Okay, let's move on to another Pierre Poilievre derangement syndrome example. This one comes again from CTV. And they posted this headline: Poilievre personally holds investment in Bitcoin as he promotes crypto to Canadians. So we're supposed to believe this is a scandal, everybody. It is a scandal that Pierre Poilievre, who publicly used Bitcoin to purchase a shawarma in London, Ontario — that was how his whole discussion about Bitcoin began. He bought a shawarma using Bitcoin, which anybody who has like the slightest bit of logic or understanding of how money works would have to realize that, hey, in order to buy something with something, you have to first own it, right? Like, okay, but here's the scandal that CTV News has diligently investigated. Conservative Party of Canada, Conservative Party leadership candidate Pierre Poilievre has a personal financial interest in cryptocurrency that he promoted during the campaign as a hedge against inflation. So it's all just a ruse so that Pierre Poilievre can make a bigger return on his crypto wallet. And then they go on and on to make it seem like it's some kind of a scandal that the guy who used Bitcoin to buy shawarma owns Bitcoin. This is just as good as it gets on Fake News Friday. Harrison, what do you think of the story?
Well, yeah, talk about reaching, right? I mean, they were clearly running out of stories, so they had to come up with something, some way they could try to, I guess, stunt the momentum of Poilievre's campaign. And this was their attempt to try and criticize his line on cryptocurrency. I was thinking about this, and I thought that if talk about crypto and decentralized currencies was not a central part of the leadership campaign, but if it was not part of this conservative leadership campaign in some way, after what happened during the Freedom Convoy, after watching Canadians have their finances frozen by the government for donating to a legal protest movement, If it wasn't part of the conversation, then it wouldn't be doing a service to Canadians. People want to have these conversations about decentralized digital currencies. It's part of the new conservative movement. But Pierre Poilievre seems to be the only person talking about it. It seems to be the only person really grasping the issue. And this article was hilarious because they make the headline, Candice, as you say, as though it's some sort of scandal piece. Here's the big scoop. Poilievre is trying to personally enrich himself. But then it goes on to say, actually, that Poilievre disclosed his crypto holdings to the ethics commissioner. He asked the ethics commissioner if he was allowed to promote crypto in his leadership campaign. And it was all done by the book. So everything he has done about crypto has been done legally. And he followed the ethics commissioner and the ethics commissioner's guidance on it, and actually took the initiative to check with him first. And then, of course, at the end, they have to provide context for the reader to tell you how many MPs actually have disclosed crypto holdings. 8 MPs in the House of Commons publicly disclosed crypto assets, Candice. 5 of those 8 are Liberals. And one of the Conservatives they listed, he doesn't even hold it. His wife holds it, yet he publicly disclosed that his wife holds crypto. So this is the farthest thing from a scandal. This is someone who is actually talking about something he knows. I think maybe there might be more of a scandal, Candice, if he was promoting crypto without holding any crypto, right? But in fact, no, of course, there's nothing here. This is classic reaching. And I think they're just trying their very best to do whatever they can to stunt the momentum of Poilievre's leadership campaign.
Well, totally reaching, totally grasping for straws. And of course, they quote a far left deranged advocacy group just to say this is the ethics advisory group. They call it Democracy Watch. Just to come up with this tweet. It's clearly unethical for MPs or party leadership candidates to advocate for changes that will help businesses they are invested in. The best way to stop this is to prohibit MPs from having investments. I mean, it's just okay. All right. Good luck with that. Good luck with that. Really, they're just throwing everything they possibly can at Pierre in the hopes that something will stick. I don't think any of the stories that we suggested or covered here today will have any impact whatsoever, other than the fact that if Pierre does win, that stuff from from Patrick Brown, Michelle Rumpel, and Jean Charest will definitely be used against not just Poilievre, not just the whole Conservative Party. It will be, but every single Conservative in the country for sure. They will hold that against them. All right, Harrison, let's do one more story here because, well, this is a good one. The Globe and Mail columnist John Doyle writes a piece about the cultural ignorance of Conservative candidates is a revealing insult, according to the Globe and Mail's television critics. So remember that cringy debate that happened in Edmonton a few weeks ago. It was the first official debate by the Conservative Party. And rather than asking these candidates substantive questions about their beliefs, their principles, their vision for Canada, where they stand on policy, we spent a good chunk of the evening just asking them nonsensical questions that you would usually perhaps ask someone, I don't know, on a first date or at a dinner party or something like that. One of the questions, it seemed like these questions were designed to try to embarrass the candidates, like tell us about your cultural interests, just so that we can turn around and mock you for them. Like the whole idea when the host asked, "What book are you reading?" The idea that these guys who are in the middle of a political campaign for their lives and for their careers, they're constantly campaigning, constantly traveling, working on speeches, working on policy, like burning the oil on both ends. That they would sit down and open up a Dickens novel or something. I mean, obviously they're not reading books right now, right? But I think the whole thing was designed to kind of embarrass them. Well, this is John Doyle capitalizing on that by looking down his nose like the snob he is, to say that, oh, these people are so ignorant. They're so ignorant. So Harrison, why don't you give us some examples from that article?
Right. So, well, John Doyle, who is, I guess, some sort of film critic, role at the Globe and Mail. I guess he's running low on stories, so he's dipping his toes into the Conservative race. He talks about he's so disappointed, Candice, that the Conservatives didn't list off some of the very famous Canadian shows, which he brings up. Because I'm going to read a couple of these paragraphs because they're just unbelievable. In the story, he writes that The list of shows the Conservatives mentioned amounts to a telltale revelation. These people seem to be completely ignorant of Canadian-made TV that's renowned, award-winning, and made in their own backyards. It was like dirty laundry being aired. It was an excursion into the mind-boggling, he writes. And then he takes shots at Roman Baber, who made apparently the extraordinary claim of having binge-watched Married with Children, which is a show not really my vintage, but I guess it's a show from the late 80s and 90s. And then he actually just lists off every single candidate and takes issue with what they said. But Candice, I'm guessing that John Doyle would have liked it if these candidates talked about their love of CBC shows like Anne with an E or Little Mosque on the Prairie. Or in the article, he mentions why can't these conservative candidates watch a show like Flashpoint or something else that's made in their backyard, which he says Orphan Black. I mean, this is so ridiculous that the Globe and Mail would take issue with the shows that the Conservatives were unfortunately asked to talk about during the leadership debate. But again, I guess he just wants us to watch some of these CBC gems, which unfortunately for John Doyle, I don't think anybody's watching.
Well, here's the thing. If anyone had actually listed off any of these obscure shows that nobody watches them because they're probably funded by the government, and the government funding stuff is not a very good indicator that it's something that Canadians want to watch, right? If they had gone out there and said, "Oh, my favorite show, everybody, is Little Mosque on the Prairie or Kim's Convenience," they would just get accused of pandering. It's like, even when Pierre Poilievre said that his favorite song was Alberta Bound. It kind of had a little bit of yeah, sure, Pierre, right? But really, the thing that I got this, Roman Baber moved to Canada as a child from Russia. Like so many people who moved to Canada, they learned to speak English from watching television shows. I have a friend who learned English like entirely from watching the show Friends. That's how she learned English. Roman Baber says he did it from Married with Children, and John Doyle jumps in to say he's watching misogynistic trash from a bygone era, offensive, raunchy, sleazy, featuring appalling figures who insult each other constantly. Yeah, that's the kind of lowbrow stuff that most people just enjoy. And the whole idea of watching TV is kind of like a mindless exercise. So no, you don't have to go out there and find the latest government-funded, avant-garde, highbrow, piece of theater. It's like, no, it's a show. That was the whole thing. What are you binge watching? The whole idea of binge watching is like it's like a guilty pleasure. The whole concept, which is why I'll go back to my point that I made in the day after the debate. The candidates on stage should have just refused to answer these idiotic questions. They should have just said, look, Tom. I appreciate what you're trying to do here, but there are important issues facing our country. Why don't we talk about the threats to Canada, the cost of living, the issues that we want to talk about? Let's not spend half the debate pretending that we're all, film critics and that we can.
I mean, that would have been the best line of the debate if someone had actually said that to Tom, if someone had basically said out loud what every single person watching that debate was thinking. They would have had the best line. They would have won the debate by just saying, no, I refuse to answer this question, which is clearly tailor-made at giving our opponents something they can make jokes about us over. Such a bizarre article from the Globe and Mail. I gotta say, it's like that's the one thing you have to say. I mean, we went through the whole week of attacks on Pierre Poilievre and little dog whistles that the legacy media are trying to catch and exploit. And John Doyle kind of comes in at the end with shots at the content, the shows candidates are watching. It's so bizarre.
Well, he does throw in another dig at Pierre again, trying to drum up this dog whistle stuff, because apparently Pierre Poilievre cited the miniseries Trotsky as the thing he's watching. Well, this is very bad, everybody, because it was made by a Russian state-controlled network, and it's notorious for apparently wildly anti-Semitic imagery. So maybe that was another dog whistle too, Harrison. I don't know. That's the direction we're going. But yeah, not surprising that the Globe and Mail would pick up on this and use it to attack conservatives because they'll attack conservatives for absolutely anything. And the whole thing was just not a good idea from the start. Well, Harrison, thanks so much for walking us through the news. I'm sure as this race heats up and as Poilievre becomes stronger and more prevalent, there'll be lots more of this derangement that we can break through and break it all down for you. So thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, it is a pleasure. I'm hoping maybe the legacy media can pick a different candidate, and we can just kind of have content for months to come. They can go down the whole list. Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah. I somehow doubt. Well, you know what happens is that when politicians are running for the Conservatives, the red Tories, the media will treat them really well, and then as soon as they become the candidate, it'll turn on them. I assume that's what would happen if Jean Charest or Patrick Brown became candidate. But certainly lots of content as always. So appreciate your time, Harrison, and the viewer. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's been Fake News Friday. I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is the Candice Malcolm Show.